In this presentation, we will record transactions related to encumbrances and expenditures. The information will be on the left-hand side. We'll put that information into the blue area on the right-hand side, including the general journal that will then post to the trial balance. The trial balance will just give us an idea of these types of accounts so we can understand these governmental accounts, where they fall, where they line up. We have the trial balance of cash being our only asset. We've got the vouchers payable. Then we have what would be the equity section for a for-profit organization here. We could think of it as basically net assets or the fund balance type of accounts. Same equity kind of concept, assets minus liability type of accounts within the governmental accounting. And then we've got the temporary accounts, what we would think of as income statement accounts, those that typically would close out at the end of a time period, that are going to be in the dark blue. This is going to be the confusing area. This is where we'll spend our time here. Because note, there's two confusing things with relation to these types of accounts. One, we post the budget, which is very unusual. We're not going to be dealing with the budgetary accounts here. We want to keep those separate from the other strange thing that we do in governmental accounting as opposed to financial, and that is the encumbrances. So we're going to be dealing with encumbrances now. We're not going to be posting the budgetary accounts, but just note that you could have these budgetary accounts. So I just want to have them there so we could see them lined up and that they could be posted too. Within the trial balance, and those would include the appropriations, the estimated revenues account. Here's where we're going to record the encumbrances. And the encumbrances we have here in our data, the purchase orders issued for. So we have some type of purchase orders. Remember that if it was a for-profit organization, if we had purchase orders or estimates, then we wouldn't record that, because that would mean that we basically just requested from the vendor, we would like inventory and we would like it for this much. We haven't paid for it. We haven't received the inventory. We don't therefore post the purchase order to the GL. Here we're going to do so because that's going to help us within governmental accounting to see that we have applied the funds in some way. So the fact that we post it means that although we haven't received the inventory and we haven't paid for anything, and therefore wouldn't record anything typically on an accrual type basis, we are committed to it in some way, and therefore we're going to basically post the encumbrances. So again, this isn't a budgetary account, but it is an account that we don't typically do with the for-profit accounting because we haven't received anything at this time or paid for anything. Then we will reverse the encumbrance. So I'm going to call this journal entry number 1. We're going to say this is equal to, and I'm going to pick up the encumbrances, not an expense, not a budgetary account, encumbrance. And then we're going to say that the other side of that is going to be going to the encumbrances outstanding. And that's going to be in our equity type section if it was a for-profit, or net asset minus liability type section that we have. And why would it go there? Where else are we going to put it, right? We need to have some other side somewhere to be in balance. We're going to put it into the equity section. These are both holding accounts that will then just basically be reversed once we actually record the transaction, as we will see. So this information is going to be, or the amount will be, this $1,101,400. Debit and credit being the same. If we then post this, then we're going to go down to the encumbrances. We're in K11. This will be equal to, scrolling back over, and we want that debit balance 11014, and then the credit side is going to be up here in the encumbrances outstanding, and there we have it. So within our activity down below, notice I'm not including this in the budgetary accounts, and I'm not including this in the revenues and expenditures type of accounts. It's basically just a holding account thus far. So it's a kind of a temporary type of account, but we're going to reverse it once we actually have the transaction that we would consider normally that we would record with regards to for-profit type of accounting. So that's going to be what happens next. We're going to say, all right, goods received at actual amounts. So we're going to say that all of these items, we have now received them, and the actual amounts are going to be whatever they are actually for. These could be some estimates up top. We might have the actual amounts being actually the same or something somewhat different. Now, in this case, note that we're saying that we received all of these encumbrance items. If we had not, then we would have to say, okay, how much of the estimated amounts up top have we then received, and reverse the encumbrances related to those items that we have received. We're going to say now that we've received everything related to these encumbrances, and these are the actual amounts that we need to record. Therefore, what we're going to do is just reverse the entire encumbrance. So the first thing we do is we say, all right, I just need to reverse this encumbrance This is going to be the reverse of this transaction. Complete reversal and negative. Whoop. Oh, let's just say the debit and credit's going to be the same number. And I'm just butchering this. Debit and credit is the same number. And then we're just going to reverse it, be right back where we started. So if I post this, then I'm just going to reverse this exact same transaction. There's something in the encumbrances. I'm going to double click on it, go to the end of it, say plus, and then point to this 11014, enter, takes us back down to 0. Then within encumbrances, I'm going to double click on that, go to the end of it, plus, and put the credit in place, taking us back down to 0. Now we're going to do what we would normally do, what we would think of as the normal kind of transaction that we would think of in financial accounting, and that is to record the expense. So we received goods at actual amount. We're going to say this is the actual amount. We're going to say we haven't yet paid for it yet. Let's say that should be here. We haven't yet paid for it yet. So what we did on the debit side is that we have goods that we have received. We're going to record those now as expenditures. And yes, that's very related to expenses because that's what we're going to call it on the modified accrual. So when we have modified accrual, which we're using here, it's basically the same thing as an expense, but it's expenditures. We're going to call the expense type account expenditures. And then we're going to say that the credit's going to go, we haven't yet paid for it, vouchers payable. So just like accounts payable, we have to make it somewhat different for governmental accounting just to confuse people. And so here we go on it. Now we're going to post this account. We're going to go over here, and this is going to be in K10 equal to, scrolling back over that debit, bringing the debit balance here up. So here we have it increasing, and then we're going to go up top to the voucher payable, the liability. And this should be somewhat familiar. This should be the normal kind of activity, increase in the liability. Liability goes up, the expenditure goes up, so we have a debit balance. We've got no revenue recorded, so we have, in essence, a loss at this time because all we're doing is focusing on this item, however. And then the last thing we're going to do is say we paid it. Okay, so we paid it. This should look normal, nothing new there. And anytime we say we paid something, anytime cash is affected, we can like breathe a sigh of relief in the sense that cash is the same as cash. If it goes up or down, it is what it is. In governmental accounting, they can't, we can't do something too different to cash. If we paid cash, cash is going to be credited. So I'll start with that. We're going to credit cash for the amount of payment, which will be the same amount. And then we're going to debit the voucher payable, which is just like accounts payable. So these last two transactions would be just like of our normal type of transactions we would expect. Okay, and then if we post this out, then I'm going to go up top. We're going to say something's in vouchers payable. I'm going to double click on it, go to the end of it, plus, and then point to that 1103600. And then we'll go to the cash and say equals, and we're going to go to the credit side and reduce that amount. So there we have that. Now we're going to go over and look at our subsidiary accounts. And so this is going to be one of the more confusing type of components because now we need this subsidiary account related to the appropriations, expenditures, and encumbrances. And obviously that's a lot of activity in one subsidiary kind of grouping here. So it could be somewhat complicated. So we want to start with these fairly simple problems to get an idea of what this report is going to basically look like. So we're going to break this out. We've got the general governmental. We're going to say first we started with the activity, which was a purchase order. So we're going to go back over and say that we have the purchase order for the 171.5. Actually, let's call it a purchase order. And say it's going to be a purchase order, and then put in the increase in the encumbrance, 171.5. The balance then is simply going to be the sum of these items. And then we're going to say that the goods were received. So once the goods are received, we credit this amount. So when the goods were received, I've said negative of the exact same amount because we're going to credit this amount and then record the actual amounts down below. So we're going to say enter that. And then the balance is going to be equal to the prior balance plus the sum of the activity here, the debits and the credits, or in essence, just this number minus this number. Then we'll record the expenditure. This is the actual expenditure. This was an estimate in the encumbrance section. It'll be a debit. So I'm going to say debit over here, scrolling back down. Actual expenditure, the 166.9. That is going to be equal to the balance. So same balance here, of course. Now we're going to go to the balance, and note we don't have the appropriation, so we didn't put in a budgetary account here. We're just going to add up the balances, which then will be the encumbrances and the expenditures. To do that, we're going to say equals SUM. I'm going to pick up the activity, which are going to be these two items, brackets, plus, and then I'm going to pick up the expenditure item and enter. Now I'm going to do the next cell has to be equal to the prior balance, plus, I'm going to say the sum of the activity, these two items, brackets, plus, and we'll pick up the activity here. The reason it's important to do that formula is that you can then copy it down now. So in essence, it's this number minus this number plus this number, but we want to be able to copy the formula, the change down if we had more than just the two accounts. Now we'll do the public safety. So we'll do the same thing. And we're going to say that there's an increase first to the encumbrances. So the encumbrances up top were the 309. And then we have the goods received, which is going to be on the credit side. And again, I'm just going to reverse the encumbrance exactly and then record the actual on the expense side. So within the expenses, it goes up. So we reverse the encumbrance and then record the expense. Notice all the encumbrances are going to be reversed entirely because we're going to say they're all paid off even though the actual expense amount is different. So then we're going to say here, we'll say that this is equal to the sum of these. This is equal to the prior balance plus the sum of these two, bracket it off and close it up. And then we'll say this one, expenditure equals this, and then the total is going to be equal to the sum. We're going to pick up the activity, which is going to be these two accounts, brackets, plus the activity and the expenditure, which is this guy, and enter. Second number is going to be equal to the prior balance plus the sum of these two cells, brackets, plus the activity, the 3085, and enter. Now we'll go to the public works. We'll do this again. It's going to be great. We're going to go to the purchase orders. The increase in the encumbrance, if we scroll up top, the increase to the encumbrance is going to be the 231.8. So 231.8. And then we're going to decrease the encumbrance when we receive the goods, decrease it entirely. And again, since I know the entire amount was decreased, I could just take that same amount. It's going to go down. These numbers don't have to be the same because it could be that we didn't decrease the entire encumbrance. Just in this problem we happen to have, even though the actual expenditure is different, or could be. So I'm going to say the expenditure is going to be over here for the public works. And there we have that. And then we'll pick up our balances, which will be the sum of these items. This will be the prior balance plus the sum of these items, right? We're just pulling down the running balance. And then this one is going to be equal to this item. No appropriations because we didn't put any budgetary accounts in place, and therefore this is just going to be the sum of the activity, these two accounts, brackets, plus the expenditure, enter. This equals the prior balance plus the sum, brackets of these two accounts, brackets, plus the expenditures, and enter. So there's the public works. We'll do this again. And so now we're on culture and recreation. So culture and recreation is going to be equal to same purchase orders, increase in the encumbrance. So we'll scroll back up top. Culture and recreation, there it is. And then we're going to say that we received the goods. We received all of them. Therefore, this is going to go back down to 0. I'm just going to say negative of that number. And then I'm going to sum this up equals the sum of these two. Whoop, something funny happened there. Let's try that again. I missed the equals. The sum of these two, enter. equals the prior balance plus the sum of this activity, enter. Then we've got the expenditure that's going to be possibly a different number. So the expenditure for the culture and recreation is this item. The balance is the same. No appropriations, no estimate in this problem. Therefore, the total is going to be the activity for the expenditures, brackets, plus the activity for the encumbrances, or the activity for the encumbrances plus the activity for the expenditures, then the prior balance plus the sum of activity for the encumbrances, brackets, plus expenditures, and enter. So there we have for the culture and recreation. Let's do this again. For the health and welfare, we've got the purchase order. Purchase order increases by, if we scroll to the left, the encumbrance for the health and welfare. Then we're going to have goods received. We're saying we received all the goods, so I'm going to say negative of this number for the credit. The balance is going to be equal to the sum of these items, and then this equals the prior balance plus the sum of these items. The expenditure then is going up possibly by a different amount because the encumbrance was possibly an estimate. Health and welfare 178.3. The balance is the same. No appropriations, no estimate for this problem, and therefore we have the encumbrances plus the expenditures, enter. This equals the prior balance plus the sum of the encumbrances, brackets to close it up, plus expenditures, and enter. One more time, and then we have to stop this. Good times. So we're going to say this equals the purchase orders for the miscellaneous. This is going to be equal to the encumbrance. So the encumbrance up top, 25. Then we're going to say that the goods were received. Goods received. Credit the 25. We received all of them. The expense and the expenditure went up by something that could be slightly different. So the expenditure we're going to say is 28. And then we'll enter our balances. This equals the sum of these two. This equals the prior balance plus the sum of these two. And this is just going to be that same number. And then we've got the balance with no encumbrances or no appropriations, the sum of the activity, brackets, plus the activity and the expenditures, and then this equals the prior balance plus the sum of the encumbrances, close up the brackets, plus expenditures, and enter. Whew, so there we have that. So now we're going to have our totals and see if this lines up to what's on our trial balance. So we'll sum up the activity. So I'm going to sum up the activity. So increases, I'm just going to add them all up. The letters shouldn't hurt our summing function. So there we have that. We're going to do that same thing. I'll just copy it over to this side. And then I'm going to sum up this way. And that's going to give us our 0 because the encumbrances now are 0, which of course ties out to our encumbrances here. Not very exciting, but we could see that they all went up and then went down. Right? And then we're going to say that the same thing for the expenditures. I'm going to copy this formula and put them in the expenditures. And obviously the balance will be the same, 11036. So on the expenditures, 11036. So here's the parent account. Here's the subsidiary account that's given us the detail of it. And then we're going to scroll down, and the appropriations, we don't have any. And so then the balance is going to be the sum of these two accounts, brackets, plus the expenditures. So there's that. We can also double check our sum by saying this is equal to the last number, the ending balance, this plus, this plus, this plus, this plus, this plus, this, and enter should be the same. We should be able to pick those up in these items as well to give us a double check. Not there, just in the balances really. There we go. And this is a total, this is like a check on the total. So if we just scan through this, here's going to be our journal entries. Here is our activity, the ending trial balance when we're just focusing in on these accounts, and then the subsidiary accounts that are breaking out or giving the support to the appropriations, expenditures, encumbrances by major categories: general, governmental, public safety, public works, culture, recreation, health, welfare, and miscellaneous. Those then adding up to the amounts that are on the trial balance.